Diaspora's intervention? Is the farmer in rural Tanzania aware of your presence? Is the farmer in rural Malawi aware of your presence? Is the farmer in southern Sudan aware of your presence? In other words, is your presence being felt? Or you are merely yet another organization in a continent that is littered with organizations which claim to be doing things which leave the continent unmoved and untouched? These are questions that we must ask ourselves, particularly now in the history of Africa. Because sometimes, without being a Jewish prophet, I look to the future and ask myself, what will happen to Africa in 20 years from today? Africa has one of the youngest populations. Land in Africa is reducing by the day. Many African countries are not using their land optimally. If you examine many African countries, and allow me to just examine a few of them and ask ourselves the critical question, what it is that is happening in those countries. Today, Nigeria claims, and I underline the word claims, that is the largest economy in Africa, with a GDP of about 550 billion United States dollars, with possibly a population of about 200 million. They have never had a census in the recent past. If they have had one, nobody believes it. And there is every possibility that the population of Nigeria in 2050 will be about 1 billion of them. Nigeria relies on oil. 80% of its income is from oil production. It suffers from what commentators describe as the Dutch disease. Nigeria is incapable of producing enough rice for her people, but they love jollof rice. They are incapable of producing enough chili, and they love their chili. They are incapable of producing enough tomatoes, and they love their tomatoes. They are incapable of doing things, not because they do not have the ability, but a conscious decision has been made by people at critical positions to concentrate on oil as the milk cow for Nigeria. So going forward, what one must ask, particularly an organization such as AGRA and NEPAD and the African Union, what real interventions must be made in Nigeria? Because Nigeria is a true potential giant in that regard. If Nigeria were to wake up from her slumber, then the entire West African region would wake up from her slumber. Because one has analyzed Nigeria and the plight of Nigeria and our inability as we speak now to produce enough food for ourselves, one need not analyze Mali. One need not analyze Senegal. One need not analyze the little Benin and the little Togo and the little Gabon and the little Cameroon, because the story is the same in that part of the world. Those of you who have gone to that part of the world, getting milk in the shelves of the stores in those countries is as difficult as getting snow in hell. So there is a sense in which we must ask ourselves the critical question, why is it that those interventions don't make us realize our potential? One sometimes, as one looks to the future and one looks at Congo, a country that is as big as the entire Western Europe, and yet Congo, with a population of no more than 80 million, yet Congo, whose perhaps 90% of our land is arable, one asks the question, if that land were to be utilized productively, that land could feed the entire Africa. In fact, I remember now it being said of Congo that he is capable of doing three things which could liberate Africa. That Congo is capable of generating enough hydroelectric power to cover the entire Africa. that Congo has waters in her rivers that could irrigate the entire Sahara Desert. Of course, some of it is exaggerated, but is exaggerated deliberately to demonstrate to us the levels of underutilization of that potential. That the Congolese soil is capable of producing enough food for the entire Africa. One asks the question, what must one do in order to unlock the potential of the Democratic Republic of Congo? One asks the same question of Angola. If Angola were to use her land effectively and liberate herself from the chains of dependency on oil, what could Angola achieve? You will remember not so long ago, during the first term of President Mbingu wa Mutharika in Malawi, that one of the songs of praises that were composed in his honor was that he found a country called Malawi that could not feed herself, and within 5 years the country was feeding herself and exporting enough grain. We now know that that is not the case as we speak. But the question that one is focusing on is, what is it therefore that you who are Latter-day missionaries from Agra, what is it that you must do? What is it? What are the kind of intervention that you must engage in? One can say that countries need to look at their budget reallocations. That is a good point of intervention, so that there is consciousness at the political level that Africa can only realize her potential if she has enough money dedicated to the improvement of agriculture. I do not know whether in your countries in Africa, in certain areas, they still farm in the manner that is so very well described in the Bible, where very late into the period that is set for planting, the farmer discovers that it's too late to till the land, and they take some bullocks and go into some open field. And as the bullocks run through the plow, they spray the seed, forlornly hoping that some will fall in the soil and that ultimately they'll have a bumper harvest. Does that remind you sometimes of your rural village? That still happens in Africa, despite the fact that certain governments have budgetary allocations complete with agricultural extension officers with whom you engage in your daily lives. But these agricultural extension officers are engaged not in agricultural extension, but extensions of their field visits for the sake of extending their per diems. These are issues that we must ask ourselves, so that there is governmental intervention in terms of budgetary allocation. We must also ask ourselves, what about the training that we are offering our students in different parts of the country in universities? I remember in the early days when in this country we had only one university, there was a dedicated institution at Egerton which was dedicated for agriculture. And I remember in those early days, the young men and women who were trained in that institution were exported to different parts of Africa, and they served and served well. But I remember now that those institutions no longer offer agriculture. They offer other courses, including conflict resolution. There is nothing wrong with conflict resolution. But I hold the view that we should be producing more agriculture graduates rather than more conflict resolvers and archaeologists. And there is nothing wrong with archaeology and history. But there is something important about equipping our young men and women with the ability to produce food, because food is at the very heart of human development.
As I listen to this message with PLO Lumumba, I'm heartbroken as an African living in the diaspora in the US. I'm heartbroken, I'm devastated. I'm overwhelmed, but a part of me is also very happy and feel liberated. Why? Because such information would have never been found if not been for the internet. Number one. Number two, he's laying down the blueprint of the issues of each African country. Now, those of us, whether you're living in Africa or in the diaspora, we have to begin to find out. Now we know, I mean, it's not news, of course, we've always knew this, but now that Africa has more than enough natural resources to supply the world, yet we are begging for handouts from the world. Something is wrong. I've always made that statement, and we know it's for two reasons. Number one, Africa is ruled by principalities manifesting in the flesh as politicians and pastors. That's the number one. Number two, and those politicians and pastors are nothing more than a puppet in the hands of the colonial slave masters. The colonialism never left Africa. They may not be operating in the front line as it was in the beginning, for years past, but now they are operating, manifesting behind the scenes, and our politicians and leaders are nothing more than the puppet in the hand of the colonial slave master. This time they're operating behind the scene. But now we, the new generation and the new breed of African rising up, we have to put an end to the two types of corruption that is really literally ripping Africa of her natural resources. The two type of corruption is the corruption from the colonial slave masters that are behind the scene and using our politicians as puppets. Those two devils or principalities, we need to cut their head off. I don't know how we're going to do this, but we have to find a way to put an end to the corruption of our leaders, which is the corruption from within the continent, and we have to find a way to put an end to the corruption from without. That means those who are from outside. Because a country like Congo have more than enough resources to provide electric power for the whole continent, but yet there's always war in DRC Congo because of the minerals and the natural resources. Something is wrong, and we as the people, we have to rise up, because Congo have enough resources, Liberia have resources, Nigeria, every country in Africa has been blessed with natural resources that we don't even need anything from the world. If anything, the world should be beating the path at the door, at Africa's doors, looking for help, not the other way around. But our resources has been stolen from us, both by our crooked, evil politicians and also those colonial slave masters that are behind the scene, operating and using our leaders as nothing more than a puppet. And those two puppets and those two Goliath, those two principalities, it's time to dethrone them. It's time to cut the head off. I have no clue how to do it, but we're going to have to start putting our head together, brainstorm, and begin to think. There's a way. I believe the only solution, I say Africa does not have a political, economic, or social, or spiritual problem. Africa have a heart problem, a heart lacking love for herself and for humanity. When we begin to love our brothers as ourselves, when we become our brother's keeper, when we begin to treat our neighbors as our brother, then we will not be easily manipulated and controlled by those colonial slave masters that are operating behind the scene. But because we have this mindset of greediness, with selfish, self-centered, egotistical, narcissistic mindset that just for me, myself, and I, and my family, that's it. It's my time. Once I'm in power, it's my time to line my pocket and take care of my family, and that's it. Once I'm out of office, well, that's it. I just make sure I have enough. I've stolen enough money from the country and from the citizens I'm supposed to lead. I just make sure I steal enough money from them, so when I'm out of power, me and my family were set for life. This is the mindset of every African politicians and leaders from inception, from time past until today. That's the mindset. It's my time to chop. As soon as they get into any kind of government position, whether president or whatever, senator, as soon as they get into office, the term they use is my time to chop. Chop mean eat. Means steal the government money, line my pocket, live a lavish life, and let the average citizen just die and live in poverty for I could care less. But if you have a heart of love and you love your brothers and sisters and you love your fellow Africans and you are put into a position of authority, you will realize you are there to help the people, not to help yourself, to the people resources. Thank you.